Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this third episode of my Lead Bravely series. And with me today is the wonderful Chester Elton. How are you, Chester?
I'm doing great, Margie. You know, I always love time with you, so thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
Well, thank you for saying yes. I enjoyed time with you too. So, and we were just talking before we went live that actually we're hoping to meet up in person because I'm up New York way next week. So that will be awesome. We've spent time online, but never in person.
That's right. We've tried a couple times unsuccessfully. I think, when it comes to our meeting Monday, I've got a theme for that, to make it happen. And we've got this, you've got this. We can make this happen.
That's a good book.
Excellent book.
Well, it's great to be with you. And, you've written plenty of books yourself, Chester. And obviously your most recent one is Anxiety at Work. And we're talking today as a lot of the headlines are talking about how the Delta variant is spreading and back to office plans are being postponed or derailed, and a lot of what we thought was starting to get a little bit more certain in the months ahead is now got big question marks hanging over it. And I think, as you know, in the midst of uncertainty, it can trigger anxiety. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, great question. Adrian Gostick, who's my co-author, this was actually our 14th book together. So we've become a lot more prolific than we had ever thought we would. The idea of uncertainty, the number one cause of anxiety is uncertainty. I just don't know, particularly in the workplace. I don't know maybe how I fit. I don't know where we're going. I'm not sure how we're going to get there. So whenever there's that gap in communication, as humans, we fill that gap, right? And we fill it with rumor, innuendo, and negativity, right? Our brains aren't wired to keep us happy. They're wired to keep us safe.
Yeah.
And so when we don't know what's going on, we're looking for danger. So one of the great remedies to that is go out and get as much information as you can. When are we going to go back to work? Understanding that it could flex, right? My son, American Express, they were going to go back in September. Now it's October.
Yeah.
So you've got to be and see that uncertainty. Is it September? Is it October? Well, when you know it's October, anxiety comes down. You can make plans.
Yeah.
So great question. Is it uncertainty that causes anxiety? Yeah, it's the number one cause of anxiety. I just don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I once read our brains are wired to look for patterns. It's why, and have predictability. And it's why if you're in an airport and you've got a flight, you would rather know it's 5 hours late than be told every 30 minutes it's going to be another 30 minutes and another 30 minutes. I think there's a Harvard psychologist, Dan Gilbert, and he said, in the midst of uncertainty, we tend to turn our forecasts into fear casts. And it was kind of a clever play on words there, but I think that's true. We fill it with sort of speculation and rumors, and so yeah, I think reducing those unknowns helps a lot. But even then, obviously, sometimes it's still just really rough going. You can find out information, but you mightn't always get the information you want. And sometimes we just have to live in a place of not knowing. We just don't know how things are going to go. And there may not be an answer. There may not be any information, or certainly not as much as we would like. And in terms of just our connection with other people, you've often talked about just the importance of having allies around you. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, another really insightful question, Margie. The thing is, in the workplace in particular, and that's where our expertise is, and yet I think the principles apply to our personal lives as well. Do you have an ally? Do you have a trusted advisor? Somebody that you can go to that's reliable. So often when we get into these high states of anxiety, we think we're all alone, and it's just me. Now, one of the biggest reasons we wrote this book is because when it comes to mental health and anxiety in particular, there's such a strong stigma attached to it, right? Yeah. You break your leg and you say, I need some time off. But he goes, oh yeah, no problem. Take whatever time you need. If you talk to your boss and say, I'm just mentally I'm just overwhelmed. I need a mental health day. We're all afraid of the supervisor or manager saying what? Oh,
Yeah.
not tough enough. You haven't got this, have you?
Yeah.
And so there's that fear. And so we pull back and we think we're dealing with it all by ourselves. This idea of having a trusted advisor and surrounding yourself with good people that you can trust is such a great safety net when you're going through not just anxious times, any kind of hard times.
Yeah.
You know this in your life. I mean, look, when you were moving from Australia back to the States, there's a lot of anxiety coming up with something that necessary, right? Who do you go to? Who do you talk to? Who can you trust? Surround yourself with good, positive, trusting people and build that network. It's very, very helpful.
I think just touching on that, you said good, positive, trusting people you can trust. And I think positive is a really important one. I know some good people, but I also know some good people who can get really anxious and make me more anxious. Yeah. And sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit anxious or, I'm not in my, best state of mind, I kind of will go through and I'm like, you know what, maybe not them, because I think they're only going to make me feel more anxious. They're going to go, oh my gosh, if I was in your shoes, I'd be so stressed, Margie. And I'm like, yeah, no, I know what they're going to say. And I don't want to hear that.
Yeah. Those friends that you tell them your troubles and they go, yeah, you're a dead man walking. Yeah, you have no hope. It is really interesting, Margie. And I think too, along that line is I'm a big fan of ritual. What are some of the rituals that you do to keep yourself upbeat? It's so interesting. I am not a morning person. I never have been. I can stay up all night. Not a problem. Getting up early for me is tough. And yet, over the last few months, I've gotten into a habit of getting up at 5:30, which for me is like ridiculously early, right? I get up at 5:30 and I go for a walk. And I grew up in Vancouver, Canada, where it's constantly raining. Not now. They hope it starts to rain again. And so walking in the rain for me is very cathartic and brings me back to my childhood and so on. And it's so interesting. I've gotten into this ritual where I wake up at 5:30 and it's always too early for me. And there was one of my wife's nieces had this T-shirt. We were at a little family gathering a little while ago, and she's quite a good runner. And her T-shirt says, "I kind of want to go for a run, and I kind of want to stay in bed." There's that dichotomy. And so my mantra is, you never regret getting up and going for a walk. You always regret when you don't.
Yeah.
Have no regrets today.
Yeah.
And it is so interesting to me, even if, you just pry yourself and that getting up, getting in motion and going for a walk, and then other little rituals, right? Where, I'll write a little 5 things I'm grateful for. I've got a friend who just had a stroke and I send him a little positive mantra that I get from my daily meditation. I sit on this same park bench every morning that I'm here and I meditate for 10 minutes. This idea of surround yourself with positive people is so important. Surround yourself with positive rituals as well that just kind of get your day off to a great start. And to your point, not only do you not want to surround yourself with those negative people that are going to say, yeah, forget it. You have no hope. Throw yourself in front of a bus. It'll make us all happy, right? There are those days when you shouldn't listen to the news.
Yeah.
The news is 90% negative. I've got some wonderful news podcasts that I love to listen to. I only listen to them once or twice a week. I don't listen to them every day. That gets you in a negative mindset too. So I'm curious, you are one of the more positive people I know. What are some of your positive rituals that keeps your anxiety low?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned getting up early because I like to get up early, but I've not been getting up as early as I used to. And this morning I was up at 5 to drop one of my kids at the airport.
Wow.
And I was at the airport at 20 to 6 in the morning, and I ended up driving into Washington, D.C., into the National Mall this morning. And I ran from Lincoln Memorial all the way up past Washington Monument, all the way up to the Capitol building. And man, I felt so good. And it was partly just the change of scenery. I live across the river in Virginia, and I just enjoyed the change of scenery. But to your point this morning, I thought, gee, I feel so good that I've just got up and I felt like I had such a big head start on the day. So exercising every morning is a big one for me. And it's not always, a run. Sometimes it's a walk. If I'm traveling, it might be a few stretches in a hotel room or something, but that's a really big one. Reading wisdom literature is something that's a big one for me too. So I've got a little pile of books, some like daily devotionals and readings, and I'll just open it up and just read something that kind of speaks to the spirit and helps me sort of get on purpose. And journaling is another big one that I have too. I'm a big journaler.
Everything you mentioned are part of my rituals as well. We're kindred spirits when it comes to this. And isn't it interesting that you mentioned spirituality? I was just on our live show with Warwick, who's a good friend of yours. I'm going from Australian to Australian today. And he talks about his faith very openly. And I asked him about that. I said, do you ever get any pushback? And he had great advice. He said, people may not be going to church as much, and I think he's a deacon in his church or something like that. Mm-hmm. He said, almost everyone, though, is spiritual. He said, particularly when you talk to young people, whether it's their connection with nature or just a greater entity, whatever it is. And I thought, as he was talking to me about that, I thought, he's right. Mm. We all have kind of this need to be connected to something bigger than ourselves, whether we call it our faith, our spirituality, our connection to nature. And that I think is really important. And it comes to back to this notion that you're not alone.
Yeah.
That there's something there in the universe that's kind of looking out for you.
Yeah. The universe has got your back. Actually, and you've got this that you held up. There is, I think chapter 10 is faith over fear, trust that a greater force has got your back. And that's a huge part of what helps me to deal with life's difficulties with more optimism and resilience, because just going, well, I have faith that everything will work out, and I'm actively working and looking for ways to make it work out. Like I'm actively engaged in how can good things happen. And it's interesting because actually just this morning I was feeling a little ho-hum. Obviously, yes, there's a lot that's going, we're kind of getting back to in-person events, but there's some that are kind of being postponed or people are kind of unsure whether to do them. And I'm just busting to get back out and being with people and jumping on planes. I actually miss all of that. and this morning while I was out there, I just meditated for a little bit and I was like, Margie, expect good things to happen even though you can't see how it's all unfolding, and keep faith that it will all unfold for the highest good. And I think having that greater faith in something bigger, these bigger forces and intelligence bigger than my own, is for me a really important part of how I view and interact and process whatever I'm dealing with.
It's so interesting when you get into that spiritual aspect of people's lives. And I really believe we all have some kind of spirituality, whether we admit it or talk about it. I think we all have that inner feeling that there's something bigger out there. Had a really interesting conversation with a bunch of young people. I was actually asked to speak at a youth conference, which was great fun, 12 to 18 years old. And of course, it was the first time they'd been able to get together, and it was raucous and it was fun and it was just great. And we talked about who's cheering for you. And I love that concept. When you get a little down or you're having a little trouble, whatever it might be, who's cheering for you? And so we just kind of grabbed them. And as whenever I show up, I bring her carrots, and if you participate, you get a carrot. So they were all, dying to get a carrot. So it was really fun. And I said, who's cheering for you? And they said, well, your mom and dad. I said, yeah, if you're in a good, your mom and dad. And they said, what about your siblings? They go, yeah, no, my brothers, they're not cheering for me. It's just kind of funny, right? I said, well, if you're lucky, they are. Then we started talking about, teachers and coaches and ministers. And then it got really interesting, Margie. I said, what about your ancestors? Do you think they're cheering for you? Because one of the young women had shared this idea that she says, my grandma he said, my sister recently died. And there are times when I kind of feel that she's with me.
Yeah.
She goes, do you think my sister is cheering for me? I said, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
My dad passed away 15 years ago. There's not a day I don't think about him. And so I think there's that aspect of spirituality as well. Surround yourself with good people here that you can count on. Don't ever forget, you think your mom and dad that have passed or your grandparents. I really have a strong belief that, yeah, they are. And that's very reassuring to me.
Yeah.
That my dad's out there cheering for me.
Yeah. That's a great thought. And I've actually, every now and again, I've thought, I can just tell they're smiling down. Sometimes I've said it to people, I know your mum's smiling today. She's not with you at this event, but I sense she's smiling down. But yes, I think that idea of who's cheering for you that isn't actually around anymore. When it comes to kind of circling back also, you touched on gratitude earlier, and I know that you are the apostle of appreciation, and you write about gratitude. And I think, to me, gratitude, a bit like courage, a bit like so many of our emotions, is a bit like a muscle. And the more we practice it, the more it sort of takes root in our lives and becomes more our habitual default mode versus kind of focusing on what's wrong, what's missing, and who's to blame. But when it comes to cultivating gratitude, I think we have to be so intentional. I know I do. I'd like to say I'm always grateful, but I have to work at being grateful. What's your experience of it, and how would you advise people to become more grateful?
I think it comes back to rituals, and like you said, I am 100% agree. You have to be intentional. So it's really interesting. I'm still kind of old school. I keep a little paper diary, even though it's all digital. I write it out again. There's just something very satisfying for me to cross something off a list. This is the part of my ritual. Well, I used to on the left-hand page. That was my gratitude journal. I just write it in, and I thought, well, I don't keep these. I throw them away. So I bought this really elaborate. Isn't this beautiful? I know, it's so great, right? Beautiful. As well as my journal, and it's got latches and stuff. I have to tell you a funny story about this journal. I was visiting my son in Wichita, Kansas, and we went to church to do some things, and I was writing my journal, and I left it at church. And we turned right around to get it, and it wasn't there. Somebody had already put it in the lost and found. Anyway, we eventually, a few hours later, we went to a guy's house who got it. And I said, so did you enjoy, reading my journal? And he said, with all those latches, it was so ornate. I was afraid that if I opened it up, some mummy spirit would come out and curse me, for all eternity. we digress, but I really do think, get a book and, and write down those things and make that a ritual. I'll tell you another gratitude practice that I really love is set a goal to write 3 thank you notes a week.
That's a great one.
Yeah, and I'll show you. It's kind of fun. We've got the, as you might guess, because of the carrot, orange is my favorite color, right? So everything we have is branded orange. It's an orange envelope. So if an orange envelope shows up, it's a little thank you card from Chester, and it says, gratitude attracts gratitude.
That's beautiful.
And I'll tell you, it takes you no time. It's fun to get the commemorative stamps, and when people get a thank you note in the mail. Sure. It's always timely because they set aside time to read it. Yeah. And it's amazing the impact it has. And they'll let you know that they got it.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? In this day of email, and, I'll often send people an email because it gets it done just to say thank you. And that's good. I'm not trying to diss the fact that I sent a thank you email. But every now and again, I will get a lovely card and I'll write something and I'll put the stamp on it and off it'll go. Not 3 times a week. I think that would be a really good goal. I'm going to take that one on. But the very process of writing the appreciation by hand, I always feel like connects me at a heart level to someone. And when they get it, I think they receive it in a way that's even more meaningful than the email or the text or whatever. So thank you for that reminder as well. Good idea.
Yeah. And have fun with it. I will tell you, I love the immediacy of a text or an email. I never discount that. There's something, like you say, it's an uninterrupted conversation. It's a lovely break in the day. There's something just fun about works of the hand that somebody actually wrote it. I love to send like pictures of nature and whatnot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And this is actually the driveway to it. We've got a little lake house up in upstate New York. This is the driveway to our lake house. And we had a friend who's a wonderful photographer, and he took this shot and he said, "Hey, what do you think?" And I go, "Oh my gosh, it's like,
It's beautiful."
And like you say, a lovely card. It doesn't, it can be branded, which I think is fun, and I do a lot of these. But have fun with it, a photo or something.
Well, can I tell you something that I've done? And of course, I wouldn't do this to a business client, but I've certainly done with lots of people over the years. And I've always loved wearing bright lipstick. And back in my 20s, I always wore red lipstick. But I often do great big kisses on the back of it with red lipstick. In fact, sometimes I'll literally put my bright lipstick on just to kiss it. And I've had so many friends over the year going, "Margie, I get this thing in the mail. It's just got these lipstick kisses all over it." But it's kind of just fun. And I'm sure that the postal service people look at it and go, "Okay, well, she's enthusiastic."
Yeah, and again, I wouldn't recommend it for a client.
No. Yeah, I know. I pick my audience.
Yeah, and I will tell you, the power of gratitude. It really is. Once you get into that mindset, once you get into those rituals, it's healing. I want to share with you a very personal story. It just happened yesterday. I've got a very dear friend, and he's from India. We've known each other for a long time. He was with some pharmaceutical companies, and we did some events. And through those events, we got to be good friends. He called me yesterday. I hadn't heard from him in a long time. And he said, "Chester, on my flight back from India, I made a list of people that I wanted to call and to thank." And I said, "Oh, I'm honored that I'm on that list." He said, "Well, let me tell you why I was in India. As you know, in India, the COVID is rampant." And he said, "My father got COVID and died." Mm. And we gathered as a family. He's got a brother that lives in Kuwait, and we got permission and did all the stuff. And we were able to be there with him as he transitioned. And he said, "You know what? All these years I've known you, you've taught me all about gratitude." And he said, I was able to handle his transition so much better. I went from grieving to grateful. And I thought, how beautiful is that? That he wasn't grieving, "I'm going to lose my father, lose my father." You know what he thought? He said, "I'm so grateful for the time I had with my dad and all the lessons he taught me." So again, I think it comes back to a very spiritual thing, that let's not dwell on all those negatives so much. Let's be grateful for the time we've had. And he said, "I just want to tell you, I shared it with my family. I shared it with my dad.
Beautiful.
It helped us deal with a really difficult situation."
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's really beautiful. And I think at a time of loss like that, it's obviously, I think we do need to give ourselves permission to feel our sadness and to grieve, but by the same token, not to be consumed by that to the extent that we can't be present to the blessing, the gift of that person who they've been in our life. And that, I mean, obviously that also transcends obviously losing someone, but just our circumstances in life. This morning, actually, as I went on my run up the National Mall, I was like, I started literally naming everything to be grateful for. I'm like, so many things to be grateful for, because I believe that what we appreciate appreciates. And
absolutely. Gratitude attracts gratitude. Yeah. I'll tell you another thing that's really interesting. We wrote Leading with Gratitude in March of 2020, just in time for the pandemic. Wow. Don't ever launch a book 2 weeks before the pandemic. And then because we had the time and our publisher was very interested in our work on anxiety, we published Anxiety. And I had some friends say, "Wow, Leading with Gratitude to Anxiety at Work, that's like a 180-degree shift, And yet it's really interesting. We have 8 strategies on how to deal with anxiety. Strategy number 8 is gratitude.
Yeah.
You can't be in a state of anxiety and a state of gratitude at the same time. So as my father would say, if you have a choice, choose gratitude, don't choose anxiety. And that simple act of, again, looking at the glass really is half full. We live in an amazing time. We should be grateful for the vaccine. That was produced in record time. Grateful for those people that we've had time to spend with. Grateful for the opportunity. There was a time when you couldn't go for a run, right? And now you can go for a run, if vaccinated people can't get together. So there are all these things that we can. My father's greatest, or one of his favorite songs was Accentuate the Positive, Eliminate the Negative. latch on to the affirmative and don't mess with Mr.
No wonder that he raised a son like you. It's funny because my father, who I'm very blessed is still alive. I'm not able to see him at the moment because of the travel restrictions to Australia, but my dad often says, so my dad milked dairy cows for 50 years, never made more than about 30 grand a year, just managed to raise his 7 kids. It was there. From a financial perspective, is not a financially wealthy man, but he often says, I'm the richest man in all the world. Look at my view, and look, I've got a beautiful wife and a few kids. And I just, when he says he's the richest man, in that moment, he is the richest man in all the world because we live, our wealth is our mindset, right? At the end of the day, there's some wealthy people who live with a lot of scarcity. So,
well, I've never been to Australia. It's one of my great heartaches. It's on my bucket list. And you know what? I hope I can go and meet your dad because he sounds like our kind of guy.
You would love him. You would just love him. So anyway, I just want to sort of bring our conversation all around because right now, obviously, Chester, we're all dealing with a lot of unknowns, and anxiety is going to rise up in us, even when we have those, even when we're trying not to have it, still there's going to be moments. So everything you've just shared, I think, they're all such practical ways to help us lead ourselves better so that we can also be a greater force for good in the lives of others, in our workplaces, in our teams, our remote teams, and everywhere else. And you would know that term, emotional contagion, that emotions are contagious, and
absolutely
fear is contagious, but anxiety is contagious, but so too is gratitude and optimism. And so if you were going to just be giving advice to someone, just to kind of wrap up here on what they can do to be a greater source of positive emotional contagion for others, what's sort of just a takeaway for them as they finish listening to this and go back to their work and everything else, and how they can approach all that's on their plate right now and all the pressure that they might feel?
Yeah, first and foremost, take care of yourself. Put together some really positive rituals, whether it's going for a run or going for a walk, writing in a gratitude journal, writing a thank you note, texting somebody you love. Develop some really positive rituals and get your day started well. Say your prayers, read your scriptures, whatever it might be. The second thing is, don't ever think you're alone. That's when I think it gets dangerous.
Yeah.
And we spiral, right? Surround yourself with good people, family members, people you trust at work, maybe at your church or in your community. And the third one, we haven't had a chance to talk about. The third one, and I'm going to steal this from our friend Warwick Fairfax. Get out and serve.
Yeah.
Serve. Be of service. Be of help. Because, when you're serving someone else and you're making someone else's day a better day, you don't have time for anxiety. And it's a blessing. Be grateful for service. And I think that's, if you can do those 3 things, create some positive rituals, surround yourself with great people and great ritual, and great people that are your allies, and then get out and be of service. I guarantee you your anxiety levels will come down and you will lead a more grateful life.
Those endorphins will go up. Amen. That's such good advice. And it just reminds me, and a great quote to finish on is one by Nelson Mandela, who said, "We are all just walking each other home."
I love that. Walking each other home. Yeah. Well, I knew this would be a lovely 30 minutes. Just the mention of your name makes me smile, Margie. So you have that impact.
Oh, stop it. Well, it is awesome talking to you. Thank you for your very precious time. I'm very grateful to have you spinning in my orbit, Chester. And I know everyone who's been listening and will listen to this is going to be very grateful too. Please check out Chester's books. Go to his website, chesterelton.com. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.